for Wednesday, the 17th of May. I'm Stephen Ridgway. Hackers are using Azure Serial Console for stealthy access to virtual machines. Can't say it's entirely surprising, but I think it is something that is possibly not as well secured as in a lot of organizations as could be. This particular group that are mentioned in this article being tracked as UNC 3944. Wonderful names these groups get, don't they? They've been using a combination of phishing and SIM swap attacks to hijack Microsoft Azure admin accounts. Unclear exactly how the SIM swap attack is being executed, but there are at least some suspicions that knowing a phone number and an unscrupulous telecoms employee is all you really need. And I can imagine that. So basically, armed with the phishing email and the ability to redirect any 2FA codes to a phone under the attacker's control, get control of the account. Okay, well that bit's fairly straightforward. But what's interesting after that is that rather than sort of delving straight in and doing a whole load of stuff which is likely to trigger alarms via logs or whatever, this attacking group is using the consoles. So effectively, as I'm sure most of you know, there is a sort of back-end console onto machines that run in cloud environments. Very helpful from the point of view of managing, and administrating devices, and if well protected, is actually a very secure way of gaining access if you're running, actual virtual machines in the cloud. Because if you have secured your cloud, your cloud administration environment well, you then don't have to open up RDP or other ports or whatever it may be. SSH, you don't have to manage the fact that this stuff potentially has to be available across your environment or even across the internet, depending on how it's all put together, because you can go to your cloud provider and access, the back end of the systems that way. However, if you haven't secured your cloud admin consoles well, and this is an example where perhaps if you are running devices in the cloud using an SMS-based 2FA is not really strong enough. So once in, access to cloud consoles, install the usual sort of stuff to maintain persistence, reverse shells, the usual bits and pieces. So what to think about: how well are you securing the cloud admin environments, and how well are you securing serial console access to your devices? In other news, unpatched smart plug bugs are opening all sorts of networks to cyber attacks. So the Wemo Mini Smart Plug V2, which allows, basically it's a smart plug. So you plug it in, then you plug your device onto it. It means that devices which are not natively smart can be well, they're not really smart so much as you can turn them on and off via an app, which is sort of useful if you want to have timers on lights and maybe open and close the blinds if you've got electric blinds. Turning on heaters, fans, though, boiling your kettle in the morning, or whatever it may be before you go down. So these things crop up all over the place. The problem with this is that these particular devices have got a buffer overflow vulnerability, CVE 2023-27217. That in itself isn't particularly surprising. These things happen. However, the devices are not going to be patched. So Belkin is the maker of these. Apparently, Belkin are not going to fix this vulnerability because they say the device has become end of life. Well, okay, that makes sense, and for a very long time, it's been basic hygiene to not have any devices in your environments that have reached the end of life. End of life, in my mind, being determined by um, the point at which there are no more security updates being applied. Um, given that an end of life can mean all sorts of different things to different people, but from an infosec perspective, at the point at which the manufacturer is no longer patching or addressing vulnerabilities is the point where it should no longer be in the environment. Or at least not without a damn good reason and lots of mitigating controls around it. So the trouble with these things is they're all over the place. People's homes, potentially in offices, they could be anywhere. And there are lots of them out there. How do you know whether your smart devices, these things are up to date or not? How well managed is this stuff? Well, my experience with dabbling a little bit with these home smart electric things, switches and whatever, is that it's a bit iffy. It depends a lot on whether the manufacturer chooses to tell you, because for example, I've had seen devices that say, yes, you're running the latest version, but the latest version was like 3 years old. So it doesn't come up saying this thing is no longer supported quite often. So yeah, I think it's definitely something to have a think about again, and keep control of. These things, yes, they're very useful, but unless it is possible to manage them well, you could end up with vulnerabilities in your environment that you weren't even aware of. So yeah, vulnerability management's quite tricky with some of these things. There is a new version of a Cobalt Strike tool that has been rewritten in Go language, and is being used to target Apple devices, both Intel and Apple Silicon macOS devices. So the tool is called GEACON, Geacon. It has been around for a while, but it has been sort of bubbling around under the radar, really. It is now better known and being more consistently used. So Virus Total has seen an uptick in uploads to check it. So this particular piece of malware is sophisticated in that it is it is using a lot of the functionality that you see in Cobalt Strike. So definitely want to do a little bit of research into. The article that we can link to this podcast has got links to certain indicators of compromise, but it is of note because it is specifically targeting Mac OS. It is better written, and it is more stealthy than previous versions of the same stuff. So Macs are not immune, so worth keeping on top of that. So as of a day or two ago, 8 new top-level domains have been released by Google. So Google bought them up, I think, years ago and didn't do anything with them. In amongst these, Google are now selling .zip and .mov internet domains. at the moment, and I suspect for a very short period of time, this is creating a certain amount of confusion and some consternation in the cybersecurity world, because .zip and .mov are the extensions for common compressed files and common MPEG-4 videos. So if at the moment you are giving somebody instructions, let's say to download something .zip, okay, that's absolutely fine. You post that, or you post the instructions in social media or whatever, or you put it on your website or whatever it may be, and it just is a set of instructions. However, some tooling is now looking for anything which it thinks can be a URL and creating a link to that URL, which means now, and the example that in the article from Beeping Computer, a Twitter tweet, first extract test.zip file and then look for test.mov. Okay, it's turned those into links when they were just meant to be file names. Most people are likely to interpret that as, if I click on that, I'm going to get the file that I'm looking for, because that's kind of how this stuff works, isn't it? Except now that could point to a malicious domain instead. So and there has been a rapid uptake of very obvious URLs, things like update.zip, financial statement.zip, setup.zip, attachment.zip, backup.zip. So yeah, I think that this is going to cause a modicum of confusion for a short time before users learn the difference. And I think there's a certain amount of scaremongering going on in the cyber press at the moment over this. I also think that the developers of tools which do automatically create links are going to find ways to sort out whether what you mean is a file or whether what you mean is a link. So I think that will sort its that's going to work its way through the system, but in the meantime, just be a little bit cautious. If you if you're sent a message referring to anything.zip or anything.mov, just make sure that if you click on that, you're not just being taken to some random domain that you're unaware of. So an article from Graham Cluey that is talking about Elon Musk's encrypted Twitter DMs. I think it's a well-written and interesting article that highlights exactly what we've suspected, that the end-to-end encryption from Twitter is not going to be as comprehensive or as useful, or even in this case free, as we would have expected. So firstly, it's only going to be available to people who pay $8 a month for the Twitter Blue subscription. It doesn't work if you've got messages that contain images, movies, or other attachments, and it's not encrypting metadata. So, who you were sending the message to, or its creation time, or whatever. And also, even if you have a Twitter Blue subscription, if the person you're messaging doesn't, it won't encrypt it. So it isn't really end-to-end encryption at all in this sense. And I think in the article, Graham makes a very good point. If you care about this stuff, why don't you spend $0 on Signal instead? And finally, something I find a little bit concerning, Microsoft is scanning the inside of password protected zip files for malware. So a researcher has uncovered this because in their line of work, they do work on malware. So for a while, it's been known that if you store malware in SharePoint, SharePoint flags it up as malware. Yep, okay, that is for almost everybody that uses SharePoint. That is a very good thing. So one of the things this particular researcher had done is just zipped, password protected, and zipped the malware just so that he could store it somewhere, because it's convenient for the work he was doing. However, he came to his attention that the zip file was being identified as malicious, or as potentially containing malware. When he's looked further into this, it appears that Microsoft is looking to excuse me, is looking to bypass password protection of files stored in its cloud services. It can do this by using password lists, common password lists, looking to see whether the password can be extracted from the names, various things that are out there. It also apparently is looking to line up, correlate, if you're sending, say, an email saying the password is XYZ, and then it finds a file that matches whatever that password was for. It then uses that password. So it's like, they are actually digging quite deep through your stuff, looking to do this. Now, there's no confirmation from Microsoft that this is what's going on. This is to some extent anecdotal, but I think it is entirely feasible that they could be doing this sort of stuff. And this particular researcher appears to have evidence that it is going on. Is worth noting, by the way, that password protecting zip files is absolute minimal level of security around the content. A lot of the encryption algorithms used when passwords are applied to zip files is very weak, even kind of down to the point of being trivial to break. There are better ways of doing it. I mean, something like the AES 256 encryptor built into some encryption programs is an awful lot better than the native stuff that's floating around, say, in Windows. So if you do really care about the content, make sure that you are properly encrypting the file, using if you're using passcodes for decryption or passwords for decryption, make them long and complex. Share them share the passwords out of band, not through the same solution that you use to distribute or hold the files themselves, so on and so forth. Don't particularly like the idea that Microsoft is wading through stuff looking for things. I suppose it's inevitable, but if you care about privacy, then beware. They are not really playing nicely in this space. I've overrun, but I think it was an interesting set of things today. Hopefully you think so too. I will call it a day for today, and I'll speak to you all again.